Ian, can we just start by, well, both of you, looking at how, obviously we got RJK, which is a very successful village-based building firm, and way back in the 40s, 50s, there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 different building firms. How did it get to the point where the building trade changed in the village, and we're now at this point?
I would say from the 1960s onwards, and the builders slowly diminished. When you come into Main Street, there was Mays, Rayworths, W.E. Wards, Bannisters, Arthur Ward. They were there then, plus an estate yard, which did the building as well, which was in Main Street. So, but after that, as other builders came in, developers came into the village, bought farms and developed them, and the village seemed to shrink because a lot of small builders set up from out of the village and came into the village and did work.
The people like Wards, they had everything on site, didn't they?
That's right. Wards
you did your apprenticeship in Wards joiner's shop, didn't you?
That's right, and you did both. You were classed as a carpenter and joiner in those days. You worked in the shop and you worked outside. And as an apprentice, if the boss sent you somewhere, you went. Whether it was a plumber's mate or driving a lorry or whatever, that was part of your learning curve. But it was a good learning curve because you saw other trades.
And what about you, Richard? How did you get into the building trade? Was it because of your
well, grandfather, I can just about remember going to W.E. Ward's yard, which is obviously where the converted now, it's White Hart Mews. I can just about remember going there into the joiner shop, which was at the first floor above behind David Butcher's house. Just about, and I've got the clock that used to be hanging in the workshop there. And that's what sort of then was always up. My granddad's working with him and making things, and he was always making odd bits and pieces.
So can I just clarify then? So Wards was that your dad?
My dad was part of W.E. Ward. He was one of the directors. He was there all his life, except for during the war. He was in the fire service, and then when the dump went up at the fall, blew up, he was sent there as a civilian and was there for 12 months, getting into the underground to find the rest of the bombs and prop the roofs up.
So at what point did you two start working together?
Well, Dad's a joiner guy.
Yeah.
He learnt his trade. Well, you learnt your trade as a joiner, didn't you?
That's right. Then I went to North School, and then in 1959 I did 2 years national service. I came out and then went back to Tech and got my Institute of Clerk of Works. And then I went to Clerk of Works. I started off as an assistant Clerk of Works, building inspector at Tutbury RDC, which was very small, which covered Barton, Yoxall and Tutbury. And then after 6 months, I was still at Tech, and one of the lecturers said, "We're looking for a Clerk of Works at the Borough of Burton-on-Trent. Are you interested?" And I said yes. And I got an interview, and I started, and I was working on housing. Then I was posted to the new school, which is now De Ferrers, and that was started as a greenfield site in 1963, 64, and I was on there, and then I went through there, then I went back onto housing and sheltered housing, and then I left there and went to the NHBC in 1966 until 1979. I was headhunted by Bailey Construction, which I stayed there till it went, before it went bump in 1990,
That's right.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Richard joined us. I had him as an apprentice. He went to Tech the same as I did. And then Bailey's folded, didn't it, after I left.
Right.
I went back as a Clerk of Works to the East Staffordshire Council, it was then. And then eventually, when Richard's told they wouldn't be landed, decided we'd got the customers from Bailey's that we'd set up on its own, but I would carry on being a Clerk of Works when the company was big enough to take 2 of us.
That's right, yeah. So
And that was in
I started 1990, February 1993, we had a Prince's Trust loan to start RJK going. Dad was gone back to Bailey's, well, we'd left Bailey's at the time, and I was just starting one man in a wheelbarrow. That's all it was ever going to be. Did some jobs for Peter Coates, Patrick Curran with my first customers, and then it just sort of snowballed from then, and we took more and more guys on. Then Dad came from East Staffs Council back to join me, and that's where we are today. But it's through those grassroots that of it being at East Staffs Council that now we're building 110 houses for Trent and Dove. which is old East Ashborough Council, so it's by Dad's grassroots work all those years ago, and us building a good reputation that we're expanding even more.
But that's the thing, is I think it's people even more so now are more likely to go to the butchers because it's local, use the local people because they're dependable, and like yourselves, you don't subcontract.
The back and working around the village and all the houses that my grandfather worked on when he was being built, and all the houses that Bannister's built, and working up and down like Wellfield Road as one where Bannister's built alone.
JT Leasley built. They demolished Drakelow Hall and built the houses from the British Legion down to the council on the Wicknell Street, and they also built from the end of Turton Close basically down to the British Legion opening. All those on the left hand side, those are built by Leasley as well. And on the right hand side, before the war, from the British Legion, Poppy Close, there was two pairs that Bannister's built before the war. Then in 1948, after the war, they built right up to the police station, which is now a dwelling.
Let's just have a think about the way the village is developed, because obviously now we're facing a potentially big development. In the 60s and 70s, all sort of Walkfield and Deepmoor and Micklehome were built. Can you remember if there was what the village feeling was then about having this, hundreds of houses built over 20 years maybe?
You're right. The Micklehome wasn't one because it was out off the edge of the village, if you like. I think there was more controversy, shall we say, but there wasn't the power. The people of the village accepted they didn't rebel like they do today. I mean, where the cricket is, that was Malabar's walked their cows from their farm, home farm, to there, and that was their fields. The cricket pitch has been there since 1893. Well, Mr. Malabar owned, or Lichfield, Lord Lichfield owned all that land, and then Mr. Malabar bought it, and on camera, he tried to get us out if they could have got building on it, but luckily he didn't, and Jeff played his son cricket. So over a while, it was in a state of limbo at the cricket. Then the parish council bought the field, and they now pay the rent to the parish council, and but that's how it was the funnel.
So were there any local builders involved in building the big estates?
No, the ones by the village hall, Deepmoor Close, was built by a firm from Wolverhampton, and the one over by the cricket but the Micklehome Drive was built by Walkers of Coeshill, who now don't exist any longer. Well, none of the companies do. And in Main Street, where the chip shop is, that was Mansell's farm, and Mr. Mansell moved here when he sold that. And the Swinfield farm on the other side of Exchange Road were built by a company called Purse Houses of Tamworth. And that was in about 1962.
So can you just tell me about the farms? Do you remember any of the farms?
I don't remember the farms far before my time. The fact that where the chip shop is now and the co-op and that was Mansell's farm, and he left there to come and live here. So it's quite sort of leading on, but
that's right. Then the one next to there was a farm next to Coates's shop was Jackson Fields, and he sold his because his farm you could drive in Main Street and come out in Furlong Lane, and those were built by a company called Edwards's of Four Oaks, those boxes, and then it's just the small builders have perhaps put the odd one in who fill in the village.
Yeah.
But nobody, I mean, where you live, I think was built by Jack Nicklin of Brayton. So that's another one that didn't exist in the village. So that was...
So you came to join us.
Yeah, that was what happened there, you see. And then Mr. Burns Mace, he's built the odd ones on the A38 over by the crickets. He built those as well.
That's George now.
Back to George.
But I mean, in the olden days, Wards and Bannisters must have built most of the houses around the village. I mean,
pre-war, Wards built a lot of houses.
Who built Deepmoor and Inch Drive?
That was from Wolverhampton. I think it's named Butt. I think the name of the company was from Wolverhampton.
What was there before?
That was just a field was owned by Jack Swinfield, who farmed next to Coates's, and his brother and his mother lived in the farm in Main Street on the opposite side of Park Road as you go down. And then they built the row houses up to which was then Bannister's Yard, and on the other side,
Where was Bannister's Yard?
where they're building now, where you come into into Mickleham Drive, where it's all been laid derelict.
Oh,
That-
Master and Printers.
Master and Printers was Bannister's Yard, and Mr Bannister built the joiner's shop on there, and Joe Middleton, it was an old chap out there when she was the manager, and two of Mr Bannister's daughters' husbands ran when he died suddenly, and it was run by Roy Anderson, who was an ex-Australian pilot who married Peggy Bannister, who is still alive today.
Yeah, I remember that story.
That's right.
Think of the cricket, because were you instrumental in rebuilding the or building the original crickets?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about what happened
Well,
there.
originally there, the Order Malum in his yard had got an ex-RAF army hut, one of the big 4-foot sections, and we got permission after fighting the committee, or the older members of the committee, but in fairness, Chairman Mr Stubbs, our schoolmaster, he was backed us 100%, and none of us were married then. I can still name the lads. We worked Saturdays, Sundays. There are pictures in our office now of the second one. The first one was a wooden one, and we worked all hours, Saturdays, Sundays, nights, 10 o'clock at night, and we built it, and we were something. But then the arsonist struck one night, and poor George Burton, we'd just moved insurance companies, and we'd insured it for a lot more, and honestly we didn't set it on fire, and we made enough money, again, by doing a lot of it ourselves, which Richard was this big.
Well, I've got some photos of me doing that in the office at the minute. Where the original hut? What's the one
on
on
the
Bowls
original
Club?
now, which original tea hut as we called it, wasn't it was at the side of the pavilion, is now the Bowls Club hut, and that was made by W.E. Ward, my father, in 1937, I think it was.
The Bowls Club by the church? Or?
By the church,
Yeah.
that green hut
Yeah.
was white with it, and we sold it to them for £100 because that wasn't caught by the fire. But the toilets were the brick built by the Heathcote brothers, Ernie and George. They built in their spare time as cricketers, and that remained until we just knocked them down, basically.
Well, yeah, and Chum Heathcote's been knocking down his,
His uncles.
His uncles.
So, of course, you've been involved in the recent
So I've been in-
Yeah.
building work.
No, I
Can you
was
tell me
involved.
about that? Just so it's on the time.
The cricket approached us and said they wanted some help, and how we get a lot of our work is put the time up front and do drawings and put yourself about and help these charities and different clubs, otherwise they've got no chance. So we got involved early days and did quite a load of sketches and ideas for them and worked it up from there. But it was always nice because obviously Dad's liaison association with the club over the years, and I remember we used to spend weekends at the cricket club when Dad played and Mum was up there doing cricket teas. So it's quite nice that going back in time and leaving your mark on the village again, something else that loads of people are going to do, see and use. So yeah, it's nice. It's a nice job. And hopefully it's made a big change down there, and when they open it on Monday we'll be there. But it's quite strange to see photos of me, which I knew were there when I was sort of 3 years old with wellies on, watching them lay the concrete to the foundations to the hut to the pavilion that we're just knocking about now. So
There you go.
quite
And
strange.
again, it wasn't easy. People in them days would work for the club, and they're generally all, but the people of the village were very generous and gave small donations, which was appreciated. And then Horace really were the kings of the county, because they only won with the brick pavilion in 1975, which was opened by Dennis Amis, and now the chief exec of Warwickshire Cricket Club, isn't he? He was ex-England cricketer.
Can you tell me what you remember of the village hall being renovated in 1975 or thereabouts?
Yes, with W.E. Ward, I was married and living where I am now, but W.E. Ward got the contract, and my father was retiring from there, but they asked him to stay on while that project was on, so we run that project through till it finished, and toilets on the back, and where the old outside urinal used to be, and put the toilets on the back, and they put the front on, and took the windows out. There used to be a big arch window at the top, and put the stage in, and made it into what it is remains today. But in the old days, the heating was 2 fireplaces, and they used to light them. I mean, they used to have the village dances in there, and the local publicans run the bar, well, as an outside bar, as they called it. So the village, used to have a dance at least once a month. Then Fradley became, over the years, Mr. Arblaster got involved. I was involved a bit with Fradley because Mr. Arblaster came from advice how we'd done it. And in fairness, he was very pleased, and he was one of they had a wooden one, it's like we did, and then now they finished up with a brick one.
Yeah,
and we taught him where to buy this stuff from, and funny enough, that was bought from a company called Anchor Building Supplies, which was part of the Bailey group, which I went to work for.
Thinking of recreation, can you remember anything that you used to do as a kid in terms of playing out or getting into trouble or whatever?
No, I was a good lad.
Yeah. Did you go to the village school?
Yes, yeah, primary school in the village, which is the existing one now. And it's funny because we've done quite a bit of work at the school over the time, and I hated school with a passion, and I hated class 2. And all the classes have changed now, but class 2 used to have a raised area, a dais, and we used to have to sit on it every morning for registration. I hated it with a passion, and when we did one of the jobs at the school, we had to rip it out, and I had so much fun with the lads pulling this dais area out, because I used to sit on there every morning and hate it with a passion.
And
So
cried.
cried, yeah, I just hated school with a passion. So it was great fun that we would rip it out, a bit of where I spent some of my life that caused me so much pain. We had great fun and ripping it out. And since then we've altered some of the other classrooms. But yeah, you can remember, God, I spent some hours in here and hated it. And
So why did you hate it so
I
much?
just hated school because I was not an academic. I'm a doer, hands-on sort of man, and but I hated it, and just how you were treated as well. You treated as children, where tech college was totally different. They treated you like as adults, and it's up to you if you did the work or not. You wasn't told,
So who was head when you were there?
Mr. Hayton.
Hayton had just left, I think, and it was Mrs. Morris. Yes, Mrs. Morris when I was there. So Maggie Fairclough took me, brother, took me, and now she's taught his daughter as well. So
Your granddaughter.
my niece. So
Niece.
It's quite a.
She's taught everybody.
She's taught everybody in the village.
Yes.
That's right. But it's quite weird working in school that I remember sitting in here and all the teachers that I had, and which ones I enjoyed better and which ones I hated, and all the bits like that. So yeah, it's quite strange working at the school.
And I think Nick started it, the old school, didn't he,
Yeah.
for 1 or 2 terms, and then they moved down to where it is now. So Nick was it, both course, if you like. It's the academy I went to, because when I went to school, we started there as an infant, you went through till you were 15. And they built the Nissen hut type in the garden of the school, and that was where the top classes were. And Mr. Stubbs taught us in our last year. And
It's funny,
he went to Barton then. And was
the old
teaching.
school has got 1855 in the gable end,
That's right.
and we're just working down at Cranfield House on that barn conversion, and that was extended, and then one of the internal walls, which would have been the external walls, is 1852. So the school was built at the same time. And
As the vicarage as well. And if you look at the design of them both, but what we know is the blue brick plinth, the chimneys,
it's all very
and
similar.
the stonework
Yeah.
was very similar to
But
the old school.
it's even us as builders just putting a link, working out by seeing different things as you go around now. But that's something we didn't know.
That's right, I didn't appreciate it was a stable either.
No.
But in the days when it was built, the vicar and the lord of the manor were the hierarchy of the village, and you doffed your cap if you saw them. I never remember, the only people I remember being at the manor farm with the Mycocks, and then it was Lord Litchfield's. Then John Malabar, Jeff Malabar's brother, bought it, and then it went on there until it was sold, and they moved to Walton. Unfortunately, John died while he was there. He was only young, 59 I think he was. But they were well known for his Frisian cows, and they still retain, because John Malabar originally started Roddage Farm, which is this just off the A38 where you turn by the veterinary Crown Farm. He started just over the railway crossing there. Then they moved, and they called the herd of Richard's herd of Roddage, herd of Frisian cows, and they've still got the same name at Walton, and they've still got cows there now.
Can I just bring you back to recreation during when you were older, sort of a teenager? Was there anything that you were part of in the village then?
Not a huge amount. I was always quite happy making something or building something.
Yeah.
What did you used to do?
Well,
as a child?
I mean, in those days, in Richard's time, there was a Scouts, Venture Scouts.
I went to Venture Scouts. It was great.
And then
fun.
he went when he didn't like those Scouts. Nick went for so long, and he more or less followed Nick into Venture Scouts.
Yeah.
And they then re-roofed and re-modernised
That's right.
the Scout
In
as it is today.
1988, we re-roofed. There's a handful of us, and through the summer holidays, I'd just finished school and waiting to start work at Bailey's, and we re-roofed the Scout as it is now, the same roofs on it. We plasterboarded out upstairs, we rewired it. We did loads of work that summer on the Scout Hut with begged, borrowed steel materials that...
So once you've been a builder all your life?
Absolutely, yeah. Since I was a little lad and didn't want to do anything else, I just knew I couldn't wait to get out of the classroom and be a joiner, which is what I wanted to do.
Which my father was. So Richard and Nick's involved with building are the third generation of Kirklands in the building trade.
In the village.
And so it's amazing.
So I know it's a massive question, but the village has obviously changed a lot in how it looks. How do you feel it's changed? I mean, I've been here like 30 odd years, but you've been here all the time.
You're not an Irish person.
I'm allowed to walk on the footpaths now.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
that's
I know.
right, yeah.
I think that the village in some ways hasn't changed for the better. I mean, the planners, look at those in Main Street by coaches. I mean, they're just diabolical, aren't they? You've got the old black and white on the opposite side of the road. You've got them on the end of the alley there. You've got Coach's shop, a Victorian building, and we're going to sit some boxes in the middle. And I think that hasn't helped the village. I think one of the better things of the village was obviously the A38 was made a better road by the seven. You weren't in the village obviously when the Seven Sisters were there, as they call them, the humpback bridges, and obviously they were done by Tarmac of Wolverhampton, and the agent for the job was a West Indian who played cricket, Rory Ogilvie, you've most likely heard. Blake was a bloody good cricketer, believe you me, he was good. And he played cricket for it and settled in Oz for a while, and then he moved on with the job. But
one of the biggest changes to the village was the bypass going in, because it just took the main traffic out. I mean, if you remember going across the A38 by Leavesley's, you used to go to Tamworth, you used to go out by Leavesley's, you have to go into the Central Reservation, then across again. It was a complete death trap of a journey. But obviously when the bypass came, that changed the village. But it also allowed development within the village of Daisy Lane, the entrance to the cricket club, the cricketers, filling in areas like that.
That's right,
Created
village,
another boundary to the village, which is good because it's stopped the village spreading on that side. I mean, there's loads of infill gone on in the village, which is good. These new houses are, I dare say it could probably be lynched, but is good to a degree, but it's just how it's managed and how the access is come. You can't stop the growth of the village, but it's just too much in one go.
you see, there used to be a field, obviously, where Oakfield Road is now. There was a big oak tree, and you up where Richard played. Well, I played in that field, and I used to put ropes up the trees. Mind you, we went birds nesting and that type of thing, and scrumping apples. but because there was nowhere else for us to play, we were more or less barred from the cricket by an old chap called Mr. Hood. He was the groundsman, and we weren't allowed near. But at Fensley, and in Fensley again to Norman Stubbs, that they got to see the younger generation and got to come along. That's otherwise.
You used to play where Michelome is, didn't you? And it fell in the sewage brook or something.
Yeah, that's, Bannister's Yard, which we're talking about now, used to be a sewage brook into the fields where Michelome Drive is. And I was a big friend of Robert Bannister's. And we decided one Sunday afternoon, we'd been to Sunday school, we'd been to church, we decided to go, we'd jump the ditch, and I landed in the middle, and it was a sewage brook. Luckily, Mrs. Bannister, they washed me down and gave me some new socks and took me home. But in the village in those days, there was, when we were at school, Orish School's playing ground was where the vicarage and the extension of the churchyard is. And that was our play area. And we used to walk down the canal with whoever took us for PE, Mr. Jones or Mr. Stubbs or whoever, or sometimes Mr McKnight, who was the head then, and we walked down there, and that was our cricket pitch in the summer and our football pitch in the winter. And that's all the recreation we got. And in the village, there were no facilities. The football team, I can just remember them playing on the Paul Pry field. Then they moved then to where Orrell School is, the new school there.
Yeah.
And then it folded for a while, and they've reincarnated it next to the cricket. Then Fradley had a good football team, and they seem to have taken over for a while. But now there's houses where Fradley football team was. So.
What about the shops in the village and other businesses? We've talked about the builders, but at one time, probably more in your time, there were a lot of shops.
Oh yeah,
and that's gradually contracted
that's
over
right.
the years.
I mean,
Wasn't it?
Coaches is the only original one left now. The post office is closed. Coaches was always been Coaches all my life, and I worked there as a kid, a butcher's kid from about 8-year-old, because my parents were friendly with the Coaches, and I used to go in the old days. If you remember, people kept pigs down the bottom of the garden, and on a Saturday afternoon I used to go with Peter's father and a trailer and fetch the pigs in and put them into different pens so they were killed on a Monday morning. And there was more weeping and gnashing at a lot of houses because the favourite pigs, and let's face it, there were 20 school, they were like little donkeys. And but then at the top of the village you got the off licence, which is now a house.
Which is that Dickinson's?
Dickinson's. And before that, they tell me, Mr Leasley first started his business there as a cycle shop.
Do you remember Dickinson's, Richard?
I remember Dickinson's very well,
Can you tell me
yeah.
about it?
There's two halves. There's the one half, if you look at the front of where Dickinson's was, on the right hand side, Mr Dickinson was always in there, and that's like sell tin cans, the food and that. And then you go next door, to come back out. I don't know if you could walk through. You used to come back out and back in the other door. It was old Mrs Dickinson, and she had sold all the sweets and the fizzy drinks and the ice creams and that. So it's two shops, but I remember that. And then as you come back down,
Well, you got in there.
What about the shop over the road, the one that sells all the falling apart?
Yeah, that was a chip shop. But then after it was a chip shop, Ben Paul, Robert Paul's father, had it as a paper shop for a while.
Yeah, I can remember that. I just about remember that.
Ben Paul, Robert's brother, started his first lot of papers on a Sunday when Will Fisher gave them up in the Crown Yard. He had a little hut in there, and eventually he got bigger, and when he didn't buy the shop he was in, where they just sold, a chap called Jeff, had a do-it-yourself builder shop. But coming from after a Dickinson shop, then the chip shop, then now where the shop is now, the
upholstery shop,
interior designers, that was the old co-op. And
what do you remember that as, Richard? Because it was.
I can just about remember it being at the co-op. I'm sure I remember it being. I remember going there, and I'm sure it was food and that in there. Then Barker's that.
No, and then Barker's had it for a while.
It was Barker's that I remember it as. Then Barker's. Yeah.
And then on the other side of the road, opposite, was a bloke called Mr Houghton, who got a little paint shop on that side of the road. And then after you walk...
That's where that's been knocked down, isn't it?
No, yes, that part was knocked down to get the access.
Butts
Croft. Again, that was a piece of land that was obviously developed.
Yeah, I've got a picture of that.
Yes, and then in latter years, opposite the post office and behind the chapel, Don Cork sold his garden to the access, which used to be the estate yard, but it got, when the estate was sold, the Lord Litchfield, Malibers bought the estate yard, and Jeff, when he got married, lived in that house in Main Street when he first got married.
But what was where the chemist is now?
Well, the way the chemist was part of Malibers garden, and you don't remember, there used to be some steps, and I don't remember, but it was the scout hut at one time. There was a pair of steps on the end of Malibers house where the chemist is now. They knocked those down, and Mr Maliber sold the land to, was it Rathbone, I think his name was, the first one. W. Ward's built that.
So Grandwood.
Yeah, Grandwood Ward, Kirkland built that. But of course, then you've got the post office, which was in those days with Fishers and another company. But next that was another little shop. Between there and Mr Orme's was a sweet shop again. The member of people I remember, it was named Ford. And then you came back into Main Street, there were no more shops down there, and you came to Wright's, the haberdashery shop.
Where was that?
Which was in between Peter Coates and Mrs Bennett, you remember
in
there. That was a wooden shop, and there were two cottages which are still there down the garden. and that was Wright's haberdashery. Then there was Coates the butcher's. Then on the other side of the road, the Coates was now the dentist, was Dolman's shop, and that got a little cafe out at the back.
You know the right opposite Coaches now, that it used to be the bakery sort of in the 80s, 90s. Can you remember what that used to be?
You've got, that was
St Burns Macy's shop. There's a chocolate shop.
Yeah,
chocolate
they've got a chocolate factory down
that
the
was a
back end.
builder's yard years ago.
Yeah.
That was Kent's, the builders.
But I'm thinking about the sort of half-timbered.
Yeah, it was the hairdressers.
Was it
Was
hairdressers?
Yes.
Was it ever anything before?
Yes, it was a baker's for a while.
What was it before the bakers?
Nothing as I can remember, it was just part of the builder's yard.
Well, it was just a barn, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a barn. And Kent's lived in the house opposite, in that yard, and that was they were builders. Sam Kent, who used to do all the photographs of the old village and whatever, his brother, and they worked together for a while then. Sam left. And I believe one of the original, Charlie, it was Charlie and Sam, his son lives still, or his wife, and she just lives in Fox Lane. In those houses again, was infill, was built on Malabar's rickyard.
So the first people in the what was the baker's shop was the bakers.
Yes, and I just can't remember the names. It was for a while, and but then I said then we went to Dolman's, which is
The dentist.
Then when Mrs. Dolman, her first husband died, she made what they called Tranter, and it was known as Tranters then, and they used to sell ice cream and groceries, and they had a cafe where they used to hold weddings and different things in there, and the cycling clubs used to meet there. And you've ever seen the wheel there on the Dragon? They'd got one there as well. And then of course then you moved a farther along Main Street. You remember Hart's Garage, do you?
I remember Hearts, yeah.
Where the garage is and the two old petrol pumps on the front.
That's where the headliners.
Headliners is now. And then on the other side there was no more than...
Do you remember that being a video shop at one in the
Oh yeah, I
probably
remember.
80s?
Yeah, I remember it being Hearts. We used to go buy
Puncture outfits.
puncture outfits and repairs, and there was a big tin shed at the back
For cars.
for cars and that.
That's
And so I remember that. And I remember the chip shop opening the day the chip shop opened, and I remember it being
Jeff Harvey was the chap on here.
Harvey's, yeah.
And that's when the co-op moved. There were 4 bays, which was when before the chip shop went there was haberdashery again by
Mrs. Simpson, was that?
yes, Mrs. Simpson originally, and then the school went to school with Richard, with Nick, sorry, and then it was the co-op, and then it was Jeff Harvey's shop on the end, and then when Jeff Harvey packed up, Robert's father, Bill, bought it, and then that was it. But then on the other side, before Barker's shop, the little white, black one, that was a grocer's shop, that named Joe Green. He used to have an old Ford T-Top motor. He went round the houses, with his open on the back, with a little roof on, selling, to Greaves House because people hadn't got cars. And then it was Barker's shop, with Mr. Bob Barker, John's father, mother and father ran it, and that was there. And then farther on, where the Horace Electronics is, that used to be a little cafe, Mark Taylor's, and that was a wooden hut again. And do you remember it being the wooden hut? Before?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, is that where it used to be a chip shop?
That's right.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I remember the wooden hut and it being knocked down and the brick built, Nick Collins' place being built.
That's right. And then you went on to the end, which was Horsley's cafe again, and another little room where they held weddings and whatever.
Is that where Cowlings?
Eric Cowlings was on the opposite side,
Right.
which had been knocked down. And on the end of Eric Cowlings, there was a little shop called Toby Williams. He used to sell cigarettes. That was Manchester's cigarette shop. And next to that, the alley, and then next to that used to be Cobbler Hill. So it's Horace in a lot of ways, and many, many years ago, opposite the chemist now, the White House on the other side of the road, used to be a chemist, Mrs. Parton's. And then for a long time without a chemist in Horace. And then when, I'm sure was it Bill Rathbun or somebody came?
Bill Allenson?
Bill Allenson was the
Was
second one
afterwards,
there. It was Rathbun's before that. And they say W.E. Ward's built that then. And
Do you remember much about the you probably, well you wouldn't, the railway station?
yep, the railway station was there in I went in the forces and I went from Horace, my warrant took me from Horace railway station over into Carding down in Bedfordshire. But then it was they also got a station yard where I remember a lot of them, they used to have the cattle come along in cattle trucks. The farmers bought cattle from elsewhere. They came, or they sent them anywhere to a show. They went by the train. The Horace Mills had sugar beeters, the pulp delivered there, and they tell me that a bit before my time, well, Arthur Prince, the coalman, and the weavers used to have their coal delivered into there at the station yard. And in the old days, way before the war, the builders used to have the bricks and cement delivered by train, then took it with horse and cart, especially in W.E. Wards, because my father told me a lot of different things of what they used to do. And they used to keep horses on the lane, as you know, the Ridgett's Crossing was known as Kirkland's Lane.
That's right.
Because my father wasn't born there, but he was only about 2. And over there they used to have a shed in the big field called Ward Shed, which W.E. Ward owned then. And they used to race the horses, him and an old bloke out of the village, at night to get the grandfather to open the gates down. And they took the horses to the field at night.
It's through the railway that the Kirklands came to the village, because our grandfather was he was signalman.
It was a ganger.
Gango. If the top island of the flyover, the one on the far side of the A38, underneath there was the house, which I don't know if you remember, the crossing house. It was demolished when the flyover was built, the bypass was built, and that's where he came, wasn't it?
That's right, because he'd lost his arm and he was cleaning the points on the railway and they were shut. He had a train and 17 trucks go over it. And then they pensioned him off to there. And you remember the other people being there, don't you? Haywoods.
I remember that. Yeah.
They went, when my grandparents died, my Uncle Bert, he was married and his wife and took it on for a while, and then they left and went to live in Fradley. The Haywoods took over, and then it was closed, I think. When they finished, Mr Hayward died, he was a signalman. He died, but his wife kept it on for a while. And then they moved to an old people's village.
But it was a cottage there, and it was the keep. There was a crossing there, wasn't there?
That's right.
It's a crossing there, and then there's the lane where the conveyor belt now is.
That's right.
It's called Kirkland's Lane, and it's the reason because great granddad lived there, and that was the crossing house there, and that was the road.
That's right. I mean, it went there down to now. It comes out on opposite the birds, opposite the.
Where's where you go to the gravel pit?
Yeah, the gravel pits are.
Can we, because I'm really running out of tape there, can we talk quickly, because you're now chair of the Orwas Show. What's your involvement been in the Orwas Show over the years?
Well, I was first involved in Orwas Show just after the war, and they used to have a fancy dress parade. And I went 1 year as Hitler and won the first prize.
That's popular.
And the next year I went as Mr Chad.
Not very PC.
When Mr Chad and my father made a board about 2'6" wide, about 4 foot thick, and they made yokes and put it on my shoulder, and it had got what no building, what no food, and it was known as Mr Chad with the big long nose, and I won a prize there. And it was, the show was in there for quite a few years, and they also played football there originally as well, known as the Paul Pry Field. And then after that the show became a roaming show, because they got no permanent ground as they got today, and they were at the farmers who would lend them a field for the show. The Speller was one, where the Arboretum was another one. The Speller was next to the railway station, which is now a gravel. Well, it's gone. It was on the other side of the road. It's gone now. They came into Sludgy Lane, opposite where the show field is now. Did one there. They did one opposite the Fradley Arms, and a lot of the time they were in Woollisfield, which is off the A38, which has got that building in the middle now.
That's right. Yeah.
They were there for a good many years. But then we had trouble with the police, because of the lorries coming out onto a fast road, out of the field. And then we had access in from and off the lanes, but then eventually, when the Woolley brothers, the show nearly folded. And that, luckily that David Butcher and Dr. Orton came along and took the guarantors. Lafarge were on the scene then, and they bought the land, and now they own it.
Yeah, that's right.
They own the
But
show.
I remember obviously growing up with the show every year, as small as I can remember, helping set it up, and in those days the ring was a big thick rope, like a tug of war rope, and it went all the way around. But we had these big 6-inch square oak posts that were about 8 foot tall. We had a boring machine, and everyone was bored out, and my grandfather Major put a post in each corner, and then you had to look down and sight all these great big huge oak posts. And every year they were drilled in the ground, and after the show they were took out, and you had to look at one end, and if you couldn't look through all the holes all the way through, the post was out of line. And they even, David Johnson and that even jokes about it now, so we have to make sure when we set the show up everything's square and everything's right, because we were being watched. But it was a proper show, and you'll never forget these oak posts that just live with you for the rest of your life. They went round the rings and the setup and how much, I can just about remember the tents of cattle. There was more cattle than the Royal Show. It's fantastic. But yeah, it is a privilege and it's an honour. And again, it's a bit like working at the school and working at the cricket. It's something you've grown up with, and we're doing it again now, sort of thing. It's third generation.
And the Orrewas show was known in those days as the Little Royal. Often beasts that had won at the Royal couldn't win at Orrewas. And if you speak to John Hill, who was very much involved with the cattle in those days, I mean, in those days you used to have a butcher's beast in between 4 potted rows, and you guess the weight. And the same with the pig. And you could bowl a nine. You used to have the old bowling alley there, and you won a pig. And I think my father won it one year, and they used to threaten button the bales at the end to stop them going through. And horse jumping, God, it was. But all they used to call the fox hunter class. And if you won it always, it'd give you could go to the county show ground, and eventually you could, if you were lucky enough, finish up at the White City.
So why the change from what it was, which was basically an agricultural show, to more of a
garden party that we're working away from now? Just different trends, and obviously as the people have changed who have looked after it, and there's farming's gone out of the area. I mean, there's no farms now in Orrewas, so when there was lots of farms, there was lots of cattle about, and it very much more an agricultural thing. And since my time coming back onto the committee is, yes, they said DEFRA you couldn't have animals, but we've proved that wrong. And the food hall, and just getting back to what we are is an agricultural, horticultural show. I mean, don't get me wrong, everything in the past is brilliant, but that's the way we want to go back to getting cattle and educating people as well, because there's so many people think that beef burgers come in a plastic bag, and the vegetables come pre-washed out of the field. So we've got to change through it, and I've never been close up to a pig or a sheep, and a cow or anything like that, because they just have no need in everyday life to come close. So it's getting it back to that.
That's right. I mean, we've got the horticulture coming back, but I remember as I was so big, the horticulture in Orrewas was something, because everybody grew everything in the garden, and there was there were 2 families that showed in the village. Alan Clunder's father was one, and Alan's father's garden was stretched to Yorkshire, and the Lindsay stretched to Wolverhampton. And they used to say a bloke in York or some smashing spuds, they'd borrow them this week for Dick Clur's born in Horace, and they'd go back somewhere, and the Lindleys borrow some. But then I can remember people like Bob Taylor, Bill Sherritt, that were keen gardeners, and my father. They used to show roses. Bob Taylor showed me how to grow big black currants, and different things. And they go around. In fairness, they go around each garden in the village. At one time of day, they used to visit the gardens, but that stopped. I think that was before the war. But I mean, they used to have these little pots, the roses in, the beans, the beetroot, and it was all grown locally. I mean,
every grandfather's garden was like.
He taught you a gardener with him.
Yeah.
The theory he wanted to house when he was young. If you don't do it like that, because my granddad don't. And that was, he dug his garden, he did that. And if the only thing my father wouldn't do was garden on a Sunday or clean his car. Yeah. But everything else, the garden got to be watered, and there's a season to plant things. And that was. But today, I'm sorry, but the kids think bacon comes from Sainsbury's, and so it gets
and that's what we're going to get back. I mean, every garden in the village in the olden days grew their own food, didn't they? And
right.
It's just. It's wrong. We don't.
And all the farmers, I mean, I can remember, in fact, they used to camp the potatoes in the field. They used to put a long row of, tip them, as we kids picked them, and they'd tip them all and make a camp, and they'd put straw on, and they had it in the sheaves, as they called it, up there. Then they dug soil and put over it, and they'd leave little chimneys to let the heat
to store them.
To store them, that's how they were stored. And then in the winter they used to have an old, what they call a tater riddle, and you wound it with a handle until they got a bit more mechanised. And the small ones dropped through, known as pig taters, and the others went through, and there was went up a little ramp, and on the end they tipped. And they got they could hook 2 bags on, so they could put the lever over it, fill 1 bag, and while they were taking that bag off and tying the ears on it, they went into the other bag. And that's how it went on. They spent days, cold, wet days. There was no stores like there is in sheds today. And as I say, the little people like to get the pigs down the garden. They never wasted the peelings, as we call off that, and they used to give the pigs a bit of slack, grass cuttings.
Well,
all went into
down Grandad's down Wellfield Road, there's pigsties at the bottom of the garden.
Yeah, that's
He used
right.
to keep pigs.
And his neighbour, 2 but 1, kept them, and his next door neighbour, they kept one at Coates. He used to go and feed them. And in Coates, which gone down where the slaughterhouses, there used to be a shed, pigsties and sheds, and there was the Oldest Pig Club was known. That, and they had a dinner in the village hall. My father was chairman for a couple of years, and they could have meal because they were in that, because things was rationed, but they could have meal there because they were a society or a pig club, and that's how they got it. And the waste of Wolverhampton around, Faceborder, used to be steamed and cooked in Wolverhampton. It used to come in like dustbins, and they used to have that. And it's known as Tottenham pudding. The pigs loved it, but it was cooked. It wasn't raw, so it was never wasted. And the old saying was, all they did waste on a pig was it squeal, and if they could have bottled that, they would have done. So we're self-sufficient. Like, I mean, Richard, my mother, they have pigs markets in my mother now, and we had one killed at home. There's no fridges as such. They would give the neighbours who got pigs some. Then when they killed theirs, they gave you some. And I can see my mother now making the brawn with the pig's head, the chawls, the hocks, even to what they call the chitlins, which is, you know what it is, it's the innards of a pig. And they used to stand under the sink and for so long and run them out and cook them. And she had some brothers that used to come for those. And she had the leaf of the pig, which is the lard, and she used to cut that in the old brass jam kettle, and it made beautiful lard. And the bits that were left, they call them scratchings, not like it's pig's hide today. So everybody was self-sufficient, and I think the village, you could see people going, talking about the railway station, you could see people walking in the morning by 8:30 to catch the train to work in Burton. And the village, that's how it was. And when you think the number of builders and Ulrich mills and farmers that employed people out of the village. So, but the village builders, like we get builders coming today, went out to the village to build as well. I mean, W.E. Wards, they built a chapel at Leek, and they lodged. I mean, that's way before my time. My father was a young man, and there's a mallet at home that laid the foundation stone, which was done. And
but they all just used to cycle on the bikes, didn't you? You just thought nothing of cycling.
Bag of tools on the bike.
Cycling to Lichfield and Rugeley on your bike with your tools.
Yeah, the tools. And, you know, it was part of the thing. I mean, Mr. Bannister and W.E. Ward were the forerunners of the Stan Clarks of this world, you say. They could see, they built houses in Wellfield Road, they built at Branston, and they rented them.
If you look at Wellfield Road, there's houses with the names in. Mm-hmm. If you start looking at the different houses, everyone's different, and everyone, a lot of the windows have gone now, but all the windows were different. And because he was the forerunner of recycling, because when they took down, was it Drakelow Hall?
Well, but they usually took that down. But W.E. Ward, we got a joiner up the yard. There's every door, window, lintel, you know, that he saved. I mean,
they're in
talk
the
about
houses
Corn and this. It was a small yard. I mean, in the winter they didn't lose time. They were dressing bricks out in the wet outside because they couldn't lay them. The old bricks that they were used, old roof tiles. Windows, doors.
But the entrance to the surgery, the bungalow next door, there's 2 cranked posts, and they come from
when they built got the classrooms in the garden after the war with the old asbestos roof, you know, concrete, and in between these concrete posts was blockwork, very similar blocks to what we started using
again. Yeah, but the 2 concrete posts at the front of the surgery bungalow.
They came up, and the roof concrete.
They're reused from somewhere else.
You ask your wife, those 2 posts, and they were pitched, and he built that bungalow. That was one to do with. He owned the house now that's up for sale for $500,000. Right. You know that they were these kind of forward-thinking people that you know, people couldn't afford houses to buy. I mean, my parents bought their house in Wellfield Road in 1951, 52 for 1,200 quid. A big, I mean, it's quite a big semi, isn't it? And a big garden. But you see, they didn't waste things in those. The sand they dug out of the bottom of the garden was a sand pit. And they dug all the sand.
Well, there wasn't anywhere to get stuff like there is now.
No, you don't go down to Tippers and get a bag of things. So you had to make it. You had to recycle it. And there's where Mrs. Fletcher lives, and there's a stone wall in the garden. And if you actually go and look at it, it's a stone portico canopy, because you can see it stood on end and buried in. But no, until you actually look at it, but they recycled absolutely everything. They straightened nails, and
right.
I mean, what we waste is criminal shame.
Criminal, yeah.
Criminal they'd be turning in the grave.
Right. I mean, going back, I remember Mr. Tipper of the original, Arthur Tipper himself. He used to come to wee wards, and I don't know Mr. Tipper about then. He always used to wear a brown suit and a brown trilby hat, and he'd come. We work in the joiner's shop, and he'd come and say, "What do you want now? What do you want this week, Walter?" And he'd say, "We want toast, cement," or, you know, because in them days used to have a load of cement. It was in underweight bags, and it was hot. But all that was ordered straight into our yard, which was quite good. And banisters. After the war, built all the banister estate in Burton, where Sycamore Road, and all round there, they built a lot of those. And Winsell. And Winsell.
We might need to finish that. Yeah, I'm getting to the end of my tape.
In Napa. I mean, nobody knows and can remember them. I can remember the lorries going in there. During the war, my father's a fireman. He was going in the RAF, and the day he went, a telegram came to our house, and I was being looked after by Mrs. Dolman at the end. And this girl, oh, this for your father. She run to the bus stop just before he got on the bus, and he was told to report to Stoke-on-Trent, to the fire service, and that's how we know about the different air crashes, because he would take me on his day off. And I used to wait by the Tree Cafe. He used to work 48 hours on and 24 off, and he used to cycle it. And I would, on my little bike, would sidle to the top of Welfare Road and sidle back down the road in the back into, well, it fell on Lane then, as it was then. And, you know, that's how, and they say the lorries there, and they used to sleep, the lorry drivers, in the cafe. There was bedrooms at the Birds, is now the British Legion. That upstairs was bedrooms for the lorry drivers, because there were no sleeper cabs.
So when was that built then?
Well, that was built at the same time as Leasley's built those houses, which was pre-war, 1930s, down, those houses I've been talking about on the left-hand side. That Tree Cafe, and then was rendered the same as those houses. And people named Napa, and they moved into where Tim Aston lives. And they got a son, Peter, went to school with me, the same time as me. And, you know, these families disappear, and, you know, it's like the Weavers. I mean, Michael's dead now, the big pal of Michael Weaver, he's dead, and his brother, they went through the Air Force, was a pilot, busy. He's now a retired clergyman, and he lives now